This man has just moved into a new neighborhood, but to his absolute shock, as he's walking through the street, he sees posters of himself on every corner accusing him of being a child molester on the official sex offenders registry when he is absolutely not. What would you do in this situation? It's absolutely crazy. Let's see what this man did. I just moved and a neighbor is putting up flyers accusing me of being a child molester. I am not. So I moved into a new neighborhood in August. Shortly after I moved in, flyers started appearing on utility poles, etc., alerting the residents that a child sexual predator has moved into the neighborhood. The flyer contains a cropped screenshot of the person they're mistaking me for's entry on the sex offender registry. We do share a name, but that's it. My name is not uncommon. I'm not Joe Smith, but I'm not Eusebius Cadmerenius either. Either way, the person posting these is definitely aware of the fact that it's not me, as they cropped the offender's mugshot out of the screenshot and replaced it with a picture from my LinkedIn profile. I've looked up Not Me's entry on the sex offender registry, and he's a fat white guy in his 60s. I am an average build mixed dude who looks black in my 30s. And to be clear, while there's no such thing as a minor sex crime, this guy is on the registry for forcible R-word of a child under 13 or something along those lines. I spoke to the police as soon as I found out about the flyers via my wife, which must have been a fun surprise for her to see when she was walking home from the train. They basically said, "Well, that sucks, but how do you expect us to find out who is putting them up?" I was confronted by a neighbor yesterday. Luckily, I bookmarked Not Me's sex offender registry page on my phone, and the guy who confronted me was level-headed enough to immediately apologize. He knew who was putting the flyers up, and actually gave me the guy's name and described him as kind of a conspiracy nut. Great. The abundant misspellings and caps for emphasis on the flyer should have tipped me off. Anyway, I've got no interest in confronting this guy myself because there's a very low chance of the interaction ending in any manner that involves all of his teeth remaining in his head. I called the police again, and this time their take on it is more or less, well, being wrong isn't a crime, just keep taking the flyers down when you see them and try to ignore it. This was last night. Ignoring this isn't an option. I'm planning on going to the department in person today when I get back from work. Has a crime been committed here, or is my only remedy going to be civil court? I feel like this is way beyond the standard type of libel that might F with my ability to get a job or something, as there's a non-zero chance that this kind of BS could lead to a vigilante type trying something. I've got something of a hectic day at work, otherwise I would have gone in late to get my butt to the police department earlier, so I might not respond here right away, but if any more information or clarification is needed, I'll get to it as soon as I can. Thanks in advance for the help. Now, as you can probably imagine, this was posted originally to r/best of legal advice and r/illegal advice. So the comments got involved. This is what they had to say. Somebody said, "A rare case of defamation per se, where no damages are needed since OP is falsely accused of being a criminal. Bonus points for the police either not knowing or not caring that NY Sex Offender Registration Act, section 168Q, makes misusing the sex offender registry a crime. So this isn't just civil court stuff. Yeah, I don't know what those police were on about. Surely there's a crime going on here, whether it's defamation or something else like this. You can't just randomly go publicly saying that someone who isn't a sex offender is a sex offender. That has to be illegal." The comment continues, "Not even going to pile on the fact that the person making the posters actually photoshopped OP's picture over a totally different person's sex offender poster, making it trivial to prove they knew this was a false accusation." Yeah, exactly. The only tricky part is proving who is putting the posters out though. Hearsay is not admissible in court, and the cops refused to investigate. Somebody else replied to this, quoting that last sentence, "The only tricky part is proving who is putting the posters out, and that hearsay is not admissible in court, and the cops refused to investigate," saying, "A warning about the consequences of misusing the sex offenders list posted on the police Facebook page with a direct reference to the present situation could be enough to stop it. At least it would alert neighborhoods as to what's going on." Yeah, that's very important. You can't just have the whole neighborhood, the whole village or city even, thinking that OP is a registered sex offender when they're not. That is so damaging. OP replied to this saying, "The guy who confronted me was incredibly conciliatory after I showed him the actual sex offender registry page. We exchanged contact information and he offered to help me clear things up. I didn't get specifics, but it seemed like his knowledge about who put the posters up was first-hand. So I'm going to reach out to him about speaking to the police or testifying, depending on how this goes." OP then added this sort of update in a comment down below, answering a lot more questions, but firstly giving some more context as to what happened next. "Hi, it's OP from the legal advice thread here. The hectic day at work I mentioned in that post was about 10 times worse than I expected, so I just got a chance to pull it up a few minutes ago and I found it locked. I'm a long-time lurker and I knew about this subreddit, so I was able to find this. I wanted to thank everyone for the great advice and reply to a few things that I saw. Reddit is making me wait roughly 10 minutes between posts, presumably because this is a brand new account, so I'm going to reply to a few things I saw on the original thread and a few people on this one in this top level comment to avoid the waiting game. Anyway, here we go. First off, a bunch of people mentioned potential difficulty with collecting a judgment if I go the civil route, and this dude doesn't own property. The north half of my block is all apartments, most of which are rentals. The south half, where I live, is all single family houses. I don't know where the person hanging the posters lives, but I don't care about making a buck off of this. My preference is, by far, to avoid any civil litigation in favour of handling this through the police if at all possible. But if I sue this guy, I don't care about collecting. To be blunt, my wife and I both have reasonably high-paying jobs, so if I were to sue this guy, it would be more about extracting a pound of flesh or forcing him to deal with a judgment hanging over his head. I know it's petty, and I'm not normally the vindictive type, but in this context, I'm perfectly content to be a jerk about it." OP then responded to this comment, which said, "OP said he was mixed and appeared black. I'm wondering if that has something to do with it. Crackpot conspiracy theories and bigotry are often correlated." Yeah, that is true. OP said, "Well, one of the first things my wife said about the situation was that she wouldn't be surprised if this is related to the fact that the only black guys she's seen on the block since moving in are me and a maintenance man in one of the buildings down the street. I try to avoid jumping right to assuming that negative interactions with other people are rooted in racism, but unfortunately, I'm proven wrong on that more often than I care to admit. And the fact that racism and conspiracy BS tend to go hand in hand, yeah." Somebody else said, "And if OP's wife is of a different race, that usually adds a lot of animosity in a racist bigot's mind." OP said, "Well, my wife is actually white as the driven snow. She's Jewish, and if this is rooted in the standard brand of conspiracy whack job racism, it's a good thing this jerk doesn't know about it." Now, a lot of users said something along the lines of this: "All legal avenues aside, if this were me, I'd be going around putting up my own posters, acknowledging that I'm aware of what's going on and making it very clear that it isn't me," which I think is a very good idea. But then again, you're sort of like playing the same game as the person that's doing this in the first place, and you don't want to have to be doing this, but anyway. OP replied saying, "What, include my picture and the actual sex offender's pictures side by side, and a link to the registry if anyone actually cares to write it down and check for themselves, and finally a notice of intent to sue for defamation?" Well, he's not wrong in thinking this could lead to some serious vigilante actions against him if it's not nipped in the bud as soon as possible. This is fantastic advice, and I will definitely be putting my own posters up. Thank you for suggesting it. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it's a lot of effort, but again, like, if you don't do that, then what other option do you have, I suppose? The police aren't helping at all, and you have to let people know that that person isn't you. Okay, then 3 days later, we got this update. This will probably come as an anticlimactic update for some people, as I won't be pursuing any sort of legal remedies to the situation, either criminal or civil. I'm going to make up names this time around instead of describing my interactions with somebody to identify them. On Friday night, I got in touch with the guy who had confronted me and backed down when I showed him the actual sex offender registry page, Joe. Turns out he's on the co-op board in the Flyer Guys, Steve, building. Steve has a sister, Anne, who comes around his apartment pretty often. Joe ran into her on Friday afternoon and told her about the situation. He asked me if I'd be willing to grab a cup of coffee with the two of them before getting the police involved. I agreed to this and we met up on Sunday afternoon. So as it turns out, fly guy Steve is actually pretty sick. Well, beyond anything along the lines of the standard racist conspiracy theory type. In fact, racism isn't a part of it at all. He believed that I had ties to the whole Epstein situation, which to him would make it easy enough for me to change my appearance. Anne promised me that he's nothing like this when his meds are working, and apparently they've been less than effective of late. She's brought this up to someone involved in his treatment and they'd planned to address it, but she didn't realise just how bad things had become. I have a close family member who has an illness that has resulted in a few episodes of psychosis. He is one of the kindest, most thoughtful people I know 99% of the time. But it's been physically dangerous to be around him during his psychotic breaks, so I feel for them. Anyway, Steve is currently receiving inpatient treatment to get back on the right track, and he will be attending a partial hospitalization program after his release to make sure that his meds remain effective. Joe wrote a letter about the situation, a copy of which is going to be delivered to each resident of his building. He's also reached out to members of the co-op boards that he knows in a couple of other buildings on the block, and they have agreed to do the same. Anne's going to post copies in the same locations that Steve had been putting them up, and slide copies under the doors of the single family houses on my side of the block. She is genuinely incredibly apologetic, and I don't see any reason to push the issue with law enforcement or in court, provided that Steve is getting adequate treatment so something like this doesn't happen again. So yeah, all things considered, while this isn't necessarily a happy ending, I'm glad this guy's getting the help he needs and that there are people who are willing to step up and help with clearing my name. All in all, the resolution has made a greater impression on me than the issue that necessitated its development, and I feel like I picked a pretty good block to live on. Thanks again for all the advice, and apologies to anyone who had their want for justice killed. Okay, well, pretty decent ending, I suppose. Yeah, quite a heartwarming one. I really wasn't expecting this story to end in this fashion. I thought that there was a malicious side to this, but actually, yeah, psychosis is obviously a terrible thing, and it sounds like Steve has some pretty good people around him trying to help him out, and that the community as a whole is a very good one. I agree with OP on that. Fair play to OP, by the way, because think about it. Like, put yourself in that position. What would you do? Like, what would be going through your mind that whole time you're seeing this stuff up in a new neighborhood that you've just moved into, and you know this is like massively tarnishing any reputation that you're ever going to build, may affect your job, your family. Like, it's a pretty crazy situation to be in, but I've got to respect OP and sort of like be very impressed by him and how level and calm he seemed the entire time. It's just very impressive to not just completely lose your mind and just go crazy, especially when the police were helping him 0%. I hope things work out for both OP and also Steve, because yeah, I mean, it's one thing having someone putting up posters of you and accusing you of things, but at least you're sane. Psychosis sounds like a pretty horrible thing to have to deal with, not just for Steve, but for his family as well. But yeah, there we go. That is the story. Not the ending I expected, but one that I'm pretty satisfied with. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, as always, guys, on this one. If you would like more from me right away, check out this playlist on screen of all my stories on this channel, and I will catch you on the next.